Okay, so this is for linear to test review. So for the first question, we want to write the equation of the function g of x if it translates f of x up 6 units. So here we have to know that f of x equals x. So if I want to translate f of x to g of x where it goes up 6 units, then my g of x would become f of x plus, since we're going up 6. Okay. On number 2, it says to write the equation of a function g of x if it vertically compresses f of x by 1 over 8. So this is my hint that I'm talking about the slope. So that means 1 over 8 has to be my slope. So 1 over 8 is always in front of x, so that means g of x equals 1 over 8 times f of x. Okay, number 3. The cost of renting an electric bike for 1 day at Bicycle Company is $55 plus 25 cents per mile, so that means that's where my x is. And it wants me to write the equation and circle the slope. So b of x is going to equal 0.25x because it was 25 cents per mile plus the 55. And the 0.25 is my slope. Okay, so number 4 says, how does the graph of the function y equals x plus 9 compare to the graph of the function y equals x? So from y equals x to y equals x plus 9, I can see that I have added a y-intercept. So, and since it's positive, that means I'm going up. So then the y-intercept of y equals x plus 9 is 9 units higher than the y-intercept of y equals x. So it's A. Okay, so Carl graphed a line which passed through the points 8, 7, and 2, 14, and wants to know what the slope of Carl's line is. So usually, like I'm sure a lot of you are going to use the stat edit for this one to plug in your 2 points, but I'm just going to do the delta y over delta x. So I'm going to put my points into my table here, 8, 7, and 2, 14. So in order for me to go to 7 to 14, I know I have to say 7 plus 7. That's how I get 14. And then to go from 8 to 2, I know I have to subtract 6. So 8 minus 6 gives me 2. So therefore, my m is negative 7 over 6. So it's D. Okay. Number 6, describe the transformation of function f of x if g of x equals 1 over 4 f of x. So remember, this is like saying g of x equals 1 over 4x. So it's talking about the slope. That's what's changing here. So since my slope is between 0 and 1, because remember, if 0 is less than m and less than 1, that means I would have to have a vertical compression. All right, number 7, Casey graphed the function f of x equals 10x minus 24, which function would show a vertical stretch of Casey's graph. So my keyword here is vertical stretch, so I know it's talking about the slope. So in order for it to be a vertical stretch, my slope has to be larger. So my slope in the original equation is 10, but in order for it to be stretched, I need it to be larger than 10, so it would leave me with B. Okay, number 8. What is the equation of g of x if it shifts 6 units down from f of x? So if I am taking f of x equals x, and then I want g of x to translate 6 units down, then that means I would have g of x equals f of x minus 6. So it would have to be B. Okay, number 9. The graph of Josh's miles from home after 8 hours of driving in the car is shown at right. Determine Josh's rate of change. So since I'm given a graph here and I want to find my rate of change, I'm just going to plot 2 perfect points here and just do my rise over run. So I see that I'm rising down, and I can also see that this is counting by 20, so I'm going 20, 40, so that means it's negative 40. And then my x values were counting in 1, so it went over 1 time, so that's negative 40 over 1, which is just negative 40. Okay, number 10. Which equation represents a line that passes through 4, negative 2, and has a slope of 1/2 in point slope form? So point slope form That's that y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1, where I have to fill in my y1, my m, and my x1. So I'm going to have y minus, and here's my y value, so that's a negative 2 equals, what's my m value? 1/2 times x minus my x value, 4. And then I'm going to simplify this because I don't want to have these two negatives here, so I have y plus 2 equals 1/2 times x minus 4. So that means my answer is B. Okay, so number 11. So which equation can be represented by the graph shown? Okay, so ideally what I would want y'all to do is to try each one of these in y1 and graph them out to see which one gives you the same graph. So let's just go ahead and do that. So if I go to y equals, and see, it just so happens that that equation's already in here for me. So y1, I'm putting in 2 times x plus 3 minus 2 exactly as I see it. And then I go to graph, and when I compare my two graphs, I can see that they are the same. So that means A is my answer. Okay, number 12. Describe the transformations that occurred to the linear parent function f of x equals x if g of x equals 3x plus 9. So I know that when I take f of x equals x, that my slope is equal to 1 and my b is 0. That's always the case for my linear parent function. But for g of x that equals 3x plus 9, my m has gone from 1 to 3, and my b value has gone from 0 to 9. So from this right here, this is one thing that has changed. Since it's greater than 1, I know this is going to be a vertical stretch. And then since I went from 0 to a positive 9, this is like that plus 9. So this is a vertical shift up. So I need a vertical stretch and a vertical shift up of 9, so it would be B. All right. So a certain function contains ordered pairs shown in the table at right. What is the slope of the line that represents this function? So I'm looking for the slope. So again, I could use stat edit and plug in my, or like 2 points to find my slope that way, or I can just do my delta y over delta x. So to go from negative 10 to negative 9, I would just say negative 10 plus 1. And then to go from negative 7 to negative 2, I'd have to say negative 7 plus 5. So therefore, my m value is 1 over 5. That's my delta y over delta x. So B is my answer. Okay, number 14. Compare the graphs of the linear functions y equals 5x plus 4 and y equals 5 times x plus 2 minus 4. And I want you to know which of the following is true. So A says the lines have the same y-intercept. Now, I can see why we would automatically say, yeah, that has to be it because they both have a 4 here. But that's not the case, especially for the fact that this is a negative 4 and this is a positive 4. So I know that can't be it. The next one says the lines are equally steep. Equally steep, that has to be talking about the slope. And since this one is attached to the x and this one's attached to the x, I know that both of those are my slope. I see that they're both the same, so they are equally steep. So the correct answer is B. So number 15 says, which equation describes the line passing through the points -6, -5, and 2, 5? Okay, so the first thing I need to do is find, or actually what I want to do is, I'm going to go to stat, edit. I'm going to put in my values here. So I have -6. Well, let me make you a table first so you can see how I'm putting my points in. So -6, -5, 2, 5. So I have -6 and 2. Okay, and then for line 2, I have -5 and 5. So then I'm going to go back to stat, over to calc, hit 4, and then enter. Okay, so then I can see that I have y equals 1.25 x plus 2.5. So what can I eliminate over here? So because this is a 1.25, I know that it cannot be c, and it cannot be A, because first of all, it's not even negative. But this 4 over 5 means that I would not have a 1 here, because this value is smaller than 1. But this 5 over 4 is a value that's larger than 1. And since this one is negative and this one's positive, I know that D has to be my answer. But remember, you can check to see what 1.25 is as a fraction if you go back. So if you go back to the main screen, you hit 1.25, enter, and then you hit math, fraction, enter, and then it'll give you what the actual fraction is if you need to do it that way. Okay. So number 16, which graph best represents a line with a y-intercept of 6 and a slope of negative 3 over 4? Okay, right away I know it's not A because this one has a positive slope. And I know it can't be D because this one has a positive slope. So let me see which one has a y-intercept of 6. Well, I know this one doesn't have a y-intercept of 6 because this is a y-intercept that's a negative value. So it can't be that one. So it only leaves me with this one. Okay, 17. The line by the equation y minus 1 equals negative 5 over 2x plus 8 passes through which of the following? I believe this is supposed to be like this. Okay, so remember, when I'm thinking about point slope form, this is my x value and this is my y value. But when I pull these values out of my equation, their signs are going to change. So this positive 8 for my x value is going to become a negative 8. And then this negative y value is going to become positive. So my point is negative 8, 1, which is C. Okay. 18. Given the function y equals 3x, which function represents a translation to the right of 6 units? I don't, because I don't ever do the late bus.
Oh, okay.
I would check McCoy, yeah.
Okay, sorry to interrupt.
No, you're fine. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this original equation, y1 equals 3, or y equals 3x into y1. So here's 3x. And then I want to compare it to each one of these. But I already know that I can eliminate these two because based on what we've learned so far, I know this makes this, this would make the equation, well, it wouldn't do anything as far as like stretching or compressing because they both have the same slope. But this plus 6 and minus 6, it's not going to shift it to the right or left. We've learned that this y-intercept shifts it up and down, the vertical, like it's vertical. And we need something that's horizontal. So let's just go ahead and move over here to these. So I'm going to try this value in y2. So I would have 3 times x minus 6. So obviously this 3x will go through the origin whenever I graph it. That's going to be my first one. And then let's see what happens with the second one. And see right here, you can see that it's shifted over to the right, and you can even count that it's 6. So I know that C is my correct answer. Okay, so how are the graphs of the function y1 and y2 related if y2 equals y1 minus 3? So this is how I want you to think of this. Originally, we told you that f of x equals x. That's our linear parent function here. And then we were able to take g of x and translate that to be equal to f of x minus 3. So this is that same concept, but instead of using this function notation, we're using y1 and y2. So in this case, it would be like y1 equals x, and that y2 equals this y1 minus 3. So it's like I still have this x here, and then I should just subtracted 3. So that's my y-intercept, and since my y-intercept is negative, that means I have a vertical shift down for y2. So if you look at D, it says the graph of y2 is shifted 3 units down from the graph of y1. That's what we're looking for. Okay. So on this next one, we made a mistake whenever we printed this out. This needs to be a minus instead of a plus. Okay. So if I want to see which one of these equations has the same relationship as what's on my table, I first need to find my slope, and then from there I'll be able to eliminate some of my equations and then decide which ones have the correct points that are contained in my table here. So I'm going to do the delta y over delta x, or you could do your stat edit here. So from negative 140 to negative 120, I know I would have to say negative 140 plus 20. And then to go from negative 20 to negative 10, I would have to say negative 20 plus 10. So therefore, my m is equal to 20 over 10, which just equals 2. So from here, I know I can get rid of A and I can get rid of B because they have a slope of 1/2, and neither one of those will work. So now all I need to do is check to see if C and D contain the correct point that's contained in this table. So remember, whenever I pull out my values, my X and my Y values, that's always going to be the opposite of what it is in the equation. So here, since I have a -10 or a -10, I know that this is going to be a +10. And since this is a +80 in the equation, it's going to end up being a -80 in the point form. So right away I can see that this point is contained in the table, so therefore C is my answer. Okay, so for a function with an x-intercept of -4, so that means my point would be -4, 0, and a slope of 1/2, so m equals 1/2. It wants me to find the y-intercept. So for my slope, I can see I'm going to go up 1 and right 2, and this is important because I'm going to have to graph this out to figure out what my y-intercept is here. So this time I'm going to start at -4, 0. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So here's -4, 0, and I'm going to move up 1 and right 2, and then up 1 and right 2. So right here, I can see that my y-intercept is 2, because that's where my graph is crossing the y-axis. All right, and for our last one here, we just need to label the parts of the slope-intercept form. So my m, of course, is my slope, and b, where I begin, is my y-intercept. Okay, so that concludes the linear test 2 review. So be sure to bring in your review for the extra points tomorrow with all the correct answers on there. And good luck to you.